That's great. Well, thanks so much, Yolanda. Thanks everyone for your time today, and I appreciate the invitation to speak at your event. I'm going to talk you through very briefly, once again, who we are and why we do this work, and then share our insights on UK farming and land use. So we are a small company based in Lancaster, Northwest England, founded in 2003 by Mike Berners-Lee, who I'm sure many of you have heard about. Our mission is to help organizations to understand their true impact on people and planets, and to inspire them to think and act differently to become truly sustainable. And we have the following main areas of expertise: it's carbon footprinting, land use and food systems, and big picture sustainability thinking. So a lot of our work is quantitative, data-based, and science-based, but we also do a lot of more qualitative and social science type work as well. And this is a collage of our past and present clients. So you can see we've worked with all sorts of companies, some really big ones, and also a few local businesses in Northwest England. You can see the four books that Mike Berners-Lee has published. Again, they have been very important over the years in uh, popularizing climate change and carbon footprints and the impacts of one's lifestyles on the planet. How about bananas? There is no planet B. And forthcoming next month is A Climate of Truth. That's the latest, the newest book that Mike has written, and it very much reflects on the current global political discourse and the place of sustainability and climate in it. Um, I'm just going to zoom in a bit more on our landscape and food and land clients. Yolanda mentioned in the introduction that I lead this part of our work portfolio. So we've worked with all national parks, and that journey started with the Lake District 15 years ago. We've worked with several national landscapes, including Cotswolds, of course, your area, Cannock Chase, all Welsh national landscapes. We've worked with multiple districts and counties in Cumbria, in Lancaster, Cotswold District, Gloucestershire, Suffolk, Powys, and several private estate as well. In England, Scotland, Wales, you can see a few names here. We worked with food producers, Juice Ice Creams, Lakes Free Range Eggs, Brewdog, though we just stopped our relationship with them. Boots, M&S, Dishoom, National Trusts, Tea-based services. These are food retailers or caterers. We've done quite a lot of food and land research over the years, menu calculator, so it's life cycle assessment of UK's food baskets, land use opportunity mapping. I'm going to show you in a minute what I mean by that, central to our landscape work. And we've worked on policy and big picture thinking in the area of food and land. And of course, I already mentioned Mike's books, How About a Bananas, No Planet B. Again, a lot of space there is dedicated to food and land issues. So I would like to start with introducing some of our landscape level work, just to provide you context for what I would like to talk for the most of the time here today. It's the food and farming and the future of land use, and how do we support communities, farmers in more sustainable, in transition to a more sustainable food system and farming. But to give you a context, I need to start with a broader landscape level work that we've been doing over the years, in particular in the past 3, 4 years across the UK. So essential to our work, as I mentioned earlier, is data, and we've been doing quite a lot of work on land use opportunity mapping, particularly for creating new woodlands. And this is one of our latest products showing scores for relative suitability for tree planting across different parts of England in this case. And you can see there are quite a few exclusion areas, the best productive agricultural land, peats, urban areas, existing woodlands, and so on. But then you've got varying scale of suitabilities from 0 to 1, depending on a multitude of factors. And this map is a transparent way of balancing ecological and policy factors for tree planting, underpinned by the best available data. We have a consistent England-wide, and we eventually will have a UK-wide coverage for opportunity scores And one of the main uses of those scores is to apportion national science-based targets for planting trees to local areas. So there is a kind of level playing field across the country, depending on its unique features of each local area. But also, this map has a high enough resolution to zoom into hyperlocal levels, as far as farms and fields, to facilitate engagement with farmers and landowners. And this is a kind of zoom into one of the landscapes we work with quite a lot, Exmoor National Park. And you can see there are quite a few interesting features in the map. There are riparian areas, little brooks and streams, and existing woodland and connective zones around them, where a lot of the data sets underpinning this map show there is a very good potential to plant trees for multiple reasons, including biodiversity enhancement, not just carbon sequestration. But there are many areas that are practically unsuitable for tree planting, and there are loads of other important habitats. There are corridors where you connect those other habitats too, so trees are not suitable everywhere. And so what we're trying to do is to balance dozens of various factors here in a clear and transparent way to help constructive discussions moving forward on tree planting. And of course, we would like to do the same for peat restoration and for rolling out regenerative agriculture. So some of the maps that we used, you might recognize, or you might see the legend in the screen, Lancaster district in the northwest. So that's where we're based at, and we work currently with the council in the area on landscape level carbon assessment. And you can see again, there are various data sets showing what sort of state the peat is in, and likewise what habitats you have other than peats, and that informs our opportunity mapping for and targets and recommendations for various restorative measures and agricultural transformation. Some of this work is more nascent than the woodland opportunity mapping, but we are making steps towards having a comprehensive land use opportunity mapping across multiple measures, in the same way that we have currently with trees. And what comes out of this work, this is just an illustration. Again, we're data focused quite a lot in this portfolio work. So I want to show you some graphs like that, just to kind of give you a context. With all national parks, we've worked for the best part of the past 4 years now on carbon assessments. And you can see this is our estimates of the mitigation potential for greenhouse gas emissions for every national park between now and the middle of the century. And obviously, national parks, they vary greatly in terms of their overall area, their landscapes. There are upland parks, lowland parks. And you can see some of the measures that we consider here: reducing emissions from agriculture, dark green bars, and then sequestration of carbon through planting new trees, then reducing emissions from degrading peat by restoring it, and then you move on towards regenerative agriculture measures, agroforestry, hedging, species-rich grasslands, and better arable management as well. And you can see a tremendous variation between the landscapes, as I mentioned, but you can see where the biggest wins are in every area, or which park has the strongest contributions to each particular measure, like the lakes and Yorkshire Dales in terms of reducing emissions from agriculture. Cairngorms, of course, the biggest national park in Scotland, the biggest potential for tree planting and carbon sequestration. Yorkshire Dales has one of the biggest deep peat areas, so peatland restoration is key there. And South Downs, one of the low-lying national parks, has the highest potential in regenerative agriculture. But again, these are carbon sequestration estimates in the long run. So all this work is great, but throughout the years, while presenting our results and being scientists by background, we've realized that those numbers are great, can serve as a great compass for strategic decision making, but they don't necessarily speak to the people on the ground, and they don't necessarily allow us to engage as constructively as possible and to hear all the opinions, particularly people who are affected by what we're proposing to do here by those changes of land management. And so over the years, we've realized that we need further engagement with various stakeholders, particularly from the farming community across the country. And also, we need to be able to have a more constructive and respectful and honest debate with multiple parties. So we've put together a farming paper last year, which precisely started to address those kind of questions. How do we have a constructive debate on sustainable farming and land use in the UK? How do we support farmers through the transition to a more sustainable land use system? And of course, we try to recognize that the farmers need to produce food, restore nature, store carbon, and thrive as communities. And it's sort of the biggest ask probably in history, where all those factors are top priorities because of just the situation that we are in. And so we looked at 15 key questions that are being most frequently asked in debates about the future of UK farming and land use, and gathered the latest evidence, presented a debate-like narrative for every question, where you have evidence and counter evidence and a gradual zooming in on what we think is the kind of the right answer and the bigger picture as well, and how do we proceed with every question. So that resulted in the farming paper that you can see in front of you. You can download it from our website. We have a 10-page executive summary, so showing brief extracts from every question and what we think the right sort of answer is given the latest evidence. And of course, then you have a full paper where you can have detailed debates and a large list of reference as well to support the debates. I'm going to rattle through the 15 questions very quickly. I think it's important just to give you a taste of what we are talking about here. First of all, how should the debate on the future of UK farming be conducted? Moving on, how do we effectively support farmers through the transition to a more sustainable land use and food system? What is regenerative farming and what role can it play in the transition to a more sustainable agriculture? This question is very technical, but it's very much at the top of the debate agendas. How much do methane emissions from livestock contribute to climate change? And there is a separate section about things called GWPs, global warming potential of methane. In situation where land isn't suitable for crop growing, does livestock grazing represent a good alternative? The next set of questions would be, what impact does livestock grazing have on important biodiversity habitats? What is the current environmental impact of arable farming, and how does it compare to livestock grazing? How does pasture-fed cattle compare to intensely farmed cattle from an environmental perspective, and at what numbers is it sustainable? What is the environmental impact of imported meat when compared with locally produced meat? And what impact does substituting dietary beef with chicken, pork, or fish have on the environment? And the last batch of questions here, what impact will any reduction in livestock production have on food security? What role can technology play in reducing farming emissions? What role do indoor horticulture and vertical farming play in shaping the future of food production and its environmental impacts? How sustainable is the amount of meat and dairy in the current UK and global diets? And what conditions would nudge people to shift their eating habits towards more sustainable options? So, as you can see, we've tried to cover pretty much all the key questions that are being asked and debated about the future of farming and land use in this country and very much globally. And we tried our best, as I mentioned, to get the latest evidence, to have a debate-like structure in every question, and to come up with a sound answer underpinned by the evidence, but also reflecting on the interests and vulnerabilities of key stakeholders, particularly farmers. So I'm just going to show this little collage of different types of farming, just to dilute the amount of text that I had to show because I got another text slide, I'm afraid, before I can show some other images and graphs. What are the key messages from the farming paper that we produced last year? So first of all, we need to consider the impacts of our land management decisions on climate, nature, food production, and livelihoods locally across the UK and globally. So a lot of that sounds really obvious to you, I'm sure, but I think it's important to constantly remind ourselves of this perspective, broader perspective of our decisions on land. Uh, we encourage transition to regenerative farming, both for pasture-based systems and arable systems. And we also think that we need to return least productive areas to nature, woodlands, peatlands, and so on. Uh, we do need to encourage new technologies such as livestock methane inhibitors or urban and vertical farming, but we should not rely on them as sole solutions. A lot of those technologies are not proven at scale yet, and there could be some negative consequences of them too. We need to encourage a food system with less reliance on animal products and less human digestible crops fed to livestock. So two important components, and this is probably the most emotive part of all the debates that we've had, because it's easy to say let's have less meat and dairy, and quite a few people are already making changes in their lifestyle, but a few people don't want to again change their habits as consumers. And likewise, we have a farming community, a lot of whom are feeling vulnerable and at threat by the discussions about reducing livestock farming in particular. So we need to find a way to have a constructive debate about this. We have some evidence, we have some global data, local data, but we also have real people on the ground everywhere, uh, farmers and people who buy foods and produce food. So we need to have that question on the menu and try to have a constructive debate about this. And we need to importantly provide support for farmers and local communities in the transition to a more sustainable food system. We need to help them to adapt to climate change. We're already seeing the impacts of climate change across the country, and some of the current systems will be at threat if we don't, for example, transition to more regenerative systems. And of course, we need the right funding, ideally blended public and private funding to support farmers through this transition. ELMS is a good starting point, even though we've heard there are quite a few challenges with the rollouts and some gaps in the funding from the current or this outgoing policy. We need private sector funding, obviously mindful of greenwashing, so there has to be very stringent vetting criteria for carbon credits, biodiversity credit funding, and so on. But I think all the options have to be on the table as well if you want to achieve this transition. I've got to show you a couple of graphs again because I realized there was a lot of text before, and one of the hottest debates in recent years is about methane and whether we are accounting for it in the right way. And again, I would just like to stress that greenhouse gas emissions and climate change is just one of the uh, um, issues that we're looking at, but there are broader sets of issues with land use change, biodiversity, and so on that we need to consider when we talk about land use and farming. So again, some people tend to be fixated too much on just the greenhouse gas emissions, and it kind of throws everything out of the debate that that all the other factors that have to be there. But looking at the greenhouse gases, we've got a Food and Agriculture Organization report a couple of years ago referring one of the uh, studies using climate models. So no accounting uh, tricks like global warming potential, no accounting tools, but just the uh, the actual emissions and the climate model from livestock going back to over a century using the best available data globally. And you can see methane emissions, nitrous oxide emissions, and also pasture conversions. So this is just ruminant livestock contribution to climate change. And unfortunately, while ruminants are amazing machines that convert uh, grass and plants that wouldn't be digestible to humans into meat and milk and things that we can use and rely on. Unfortunately, there is a payment for that capacity in the form of particularly methane emissions. And if you look at the actual contribution to warming, so again, that doesn't is not based on the carbon accounting metrics, GWPs. We've got, unfortunately, quite a strong contribution from the global livestock industry to this warming that we're already seeing, and this goes up until mid 2010s. So obviously this trend continues. But you know the contribution is quite strong, over 10%, and you've got other components, as you can see, particularly deforestation that res results from pasture conversion. So we need to be mindful of the climate impact, but also, again, as I stressed a few minutes ago, we need to have a bigger picture in terms of what does this do to biodiversity? Can livestock have a positive role in conserving some of the biodiversity habitats? What are sustainable numbers of livestock if we want to both mitigate the climate and enhance biodiversity? So I'm going to show you some of the food scenarios, again, from a research by Mike and colleagues over the years, just to trying to answer the question, how can we feed the growing global population? We are expecting the population to increase to over 9 billion by the middle of the century, and uh, obviously we need to find a way to feed everybody. We're trying not to encroach more on the natural habitats. Around 50% of the UK of the global land area is used for agriculture currently. So if we want to avoid further deforestation and destruction of some important habitats, we want to make sure we have to balance the sheets in terms of the food production. And you can see here today's production. So per capita per day, we're producing something like 3 times more calories than an average person needs. And a lot of that goes into, so there are key components here, calories from meat and dairy at the bottom, then calories from the crops that we can eat directly. There is excess consumption, unfortunately, so we are having about 10% more energy than we need currently. But again, it's very uneven in different parts of the world. We have some crops that are replanted, so some stock is reserved for the subsequent years. There is bioenergy production. You can see that dash bar. Uh, Unfortunately, there is quite a lot of waste in the system, both on the production and the consumption sides. And then the last bar here is animal losses, and that's what we uh, lose by feeding crops to livestock. So crops that could be fed directly to humans, that could be digested by the humans. And so we've got that bar here, and there are three exploratory scenarios here just to show what might be the futures with a higher global population in a few decades' time. So the first one is quite radical to many people in terms of reducing the number of animal products, 50% less meat and dairy. Uh, it has the same biofuel use and the same waste use, as the same waste production as you can see, same excess consumption as well. Uh, but just a reduction in the meat and dairy, and again bioenergy, and it's a very difficult topic. You know, you've heard the discussion about aviation fuel, for example, or shipping fuel based on some of the oil, recycled oil, and some bioenergy used for substituting the current fossil fuel consumption. And we are really cautious about bioenergy at Small World because, again, of the pressures of land and competition for land that you can see here. So the next scenario is 25% less meat and dairy in the diets, same bioenergy, uh, but no food waste and no excess consumption. That gives you roughly the same bar in the middle of the century. And the other possibility, keep the same diet as today. So we have, in order to do that with broader population, with bigger population, and without converting more land to agriculture, we can't have biofuels and we can't have waste and no excess consumption as well. And this is the amount of at the top of crops that we have to feed to the large amount of livestock that we would need to maintain the diet. But it's possible as long as we don't have bioenergy and waste and excess consumption. So you can see from these simple scenarios that it's tricky, really tricky balancing act going forward. How do we use land? How do we feed the population? How do we not further cause the tremendous biodiversity loss that we've had in recent decades? We're on the sixth mass extinction now, unfortunately. So we need to find the way forward, and that's at the backdrop of the increasing meat consumption per capita. So this is the data from the past 5 decades. Well, it's going up to 2011 at the moment, but you can see a very strong trend across different types of meat consumption per capita, particularly with pork and poultry. Actually, ruminants have stayed roughly at the same level, but that's per capita consumption. It's doubled in those 5 decades roughly, and of course we had a tremendous increase in global population in the same time. So you can see very different dynamics in various countries, obviously depending on their um, wealth and their cultural habits and so on and their land. But overall, we need somehow to square this trend with these constraints going forward that you can see on the left here. And there is a legitimate question being asked by some of the farmers who would say, in this country in particular, uh, if there is a growing demand and if we are producing meats with better environmental and animal welfare standards than in many other places, why wouldn't we fill that demand? Why should we cut our production here and somebody else will step in and potentially use that, create further deforestation elsewhere? And I think it's a very complicated and emotive subject again to discuss, but we need to talk about this somehow and find the right answers. So I'm just going to conclude my introduction by saying that all all that I've shown you so far in the past 25 minutes or so is a work in progress. So we are constantly trying to learn and improve and keep our minds open as much as we can physically as humans to new evidence. So we are having conversations with the likes of the NFU. We've got loads of regenerative farming experts in our networks. We are in constant contact with protected landscapes teams when we do quite a lot of work for them over the years, and many other stakeholders just to discuss the evidence and to debate the solutions. We've got an interesting pilot project going on with several partners, Russell Regen, Food Farming Countryside Commission, Food Futures, and UKCH, to adapt a model. It's called TIFI Regio, so it's 10 years for agroecology, regional version. It's a food and farming model for the European continent. We're trying to adapt it to local areas in the UK, districts and national parks. Again, similar to our landscape work that I've shown you earlier, just to understand better what are the local capacities for regenerative farming and what are the food outputs that will be produced as a result of transition into regenerative farming. So again, it will help decision making, hopefully in local areas. We've got a very interesting pilot project with a company called Restore Nature, to develop a holistic climate and nature strategies for local areas, and importantly, to provide blended funding options to farmers and landowners to drive implementation. What I've shown you with some of our models and results with national parks, woodland opportunity mapping, that's very much at the strategic level, and it implicitly has a lot of nature considerations, but not sufficiently for a broader set of criteria in order to make decisions. And we don't look at funding options, the blending funding options that I mentioned earlier. So we're trying to partner with companies like Restore just to have a better toolkit and understanding of the options going forward and better engagement strategies with farmers and landowners. We are planning to extend our woodland opportunity mapping to regenerative agriculture measures. We've got several measures on the table, so that work might happen later this year. And we are planning to create an interactive web-based interface for our opportunity maps. So this will allow any user, any local authority area, or any cluster of farms or even individual farms to just get on the website, uh, put their shapefile of their land area, and potentially change some of the preferences in the model. It's a very transparent model just to see, just to reflect on their local knowledge of land better, maybe add new data sets that we haven't had, we can't have at the national level in the current setting. And then it will be an interactive real-time tool to explore the best suitable use for every plot of land in the country. So that's again in the works and the plans. Importantly, we are constantly learning, as I mentioned earlier, and we are planning to produce a new version of the farming paper with a stronger focus on multifunctional landscapes, on regenerative farming, on biodiversity, and of course on the emerging DEFRA's land use framework. So that will probably be in a year's time or so, but we are constantly in a listening mode. We are gathering feedback on our current version of the farming paper, feedback on all our projects. Got lots of irons in the fire, as you can see. And so hopefully at some point we'll have another version of the paper which will be even better suited to the current state of the debate and help move it forward. And now I would like to just very quickly mention that we also work with the Office for Environmental Protection to review the emerging local nature recovery strategies. So some of the images you can see from around the country here. So very much engaged with that process. Of course, we're looking at things like nether gel principles, looking at maximum sustainable outputs for upland areas. Again, a very strong set of views, I think, around the community on whether this works or doesn't work. But I think we are more and more convinced that this is one of the key levers in the transitioning to a more sustainable uphill land management. You can see a picture of a food supplement on the left. I think a lot of our uphill areas are overgrazed, sadly, and I think we need to really seriously look at regenerative farming and how we can be more sustainable in those areas. And finally, I would like to conclude with an extract from our paper. These are 5 principles for evidence-based decision making, which apply to broader context, not just to food and farming, but this is the application here. So we want to honor the best evidence, including the best available science. We need to respect all interests. We need to ensure transparency of motive and funding. We need to foster open-mindedness. Because in high quality debates, there is a great deal of development of thinking from everyone involved. We are trying the best ourselves to evolve our thinking, to look at the evidence and encourage everybody else to do that. And we need to uphold a culture of honest, evidence-based, respectful debate. And I'm going to conclude on this note. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Dmitry. That was really fascinating to hear about the work you've been doing at Small World Consulting and the food producers that you've been working with, and also the conversations you've been having with farmers. I was particularly interested to see the graph on the sort of different types of landscapes in the UK and actually how different options impact them. So thank you very much for that. That's a really helpful thing, I think, for us to keep in our minds about when we're talking about landscape. We're talking about vast variation. And also this conversation, whilst our conference today is based on UK farming, also it's part of a global conversation as well whenever we're talking about climate. So thank you very much for that. And I think we've got a couple of questions from the chat, and just a reminder, we've got 10 minutes sort of until we break. So if anyone has any burning questions for Dmitry, then please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll do our best to pick them up. So let me just take a little look here. And so we have a question here from Bill Grayson. And Bill says, can you clarify whether best reductions to meat and livestock production can be made if we are trying to reduce competition with human edible foods? Aren't ruminants a better option than monogastric livestock because they can utilize feeds that people cannot eat?
Thanks so much, Bill. And just to give everyone a heads up, I know Bill and I know each other, and we are having those discussions frequently. And we've got a meeting next week with quite a few of Bill's colleagues from regenerative community in the Northwest to further talk about this. But I think, Bill, it's a great question. It's complicated, I think, as everything else is. It's complicated. I think our paper is probably more critical of ruminants in general, as you envisage. But again, our thinking is moving in the direction of having ruminants in regenerative systems, both in arable and grasslands. I think it's very complicated, and we need. I think we need all different kinds of livestock in the system, but at various sustainable levels. And we are trying our best to understand the trade-offs and to sort of figure out what those levels are. And if we were just an isolated island, it would still be quite difficult to figure that out based on our land use and our consumption. But we've got so many global supply chains. You're right to say there are a lot of issues with soy supplies for poultry and pig industry, for example. So we've got things that cause deforestation, whereas they don't cause as much impact in the farms in the UK from those systems. I think I haven't got currently the percentage of the dietary breakdown or the production in the country for those different types of animals, but I think every livestock system has issues, but also quite a few of them have benefits. And I think ruminants, particularly from your community, I've been learning that they have an important role in improving some of the habitats and conserving some of the habitats in the country and making even arable systems more sustainable if you go through regenerative methods and inter-seasonal grass lays. So I think we have to be very careful not just to have a very black and white reading of, ruminants are bad and poultry is good. And unfortunately, we found ourselves in hot water recently in various comms that were kind of misquoted from us in this black and white fashion. And we have to have a very nuanced and informed debate about this. So I can see the role of ruminants in the UK and globally. We just need to figure out what's the most sustainable way to use them and where and how. Sorry, it's a long-winded answer, but I hope that reflects the thinking that we've been having.
That's great. Thank you, Dmitry. And I'm just going to ask another question here. Bear with me one moment, which is from Pri. So Pri asks, from your experience, Dmitry, what have been the most effective strategies for fostering constructive dialogue and ensuring that data-driven recommendations translate into real-world changes at the farm level?
It's a very good question, Pri. Thanks. Well, we're still learning how to do that. And I don't think we've got it right a lot of the time in the past 20 years. I've been with Small World for about 4 years, and uh, I think there was a certain tension between some of our scientific recommendations and the data and the farming communities, particularly in the Northwest, where we've done most of the work over time in the Lake District National Park and Cumbria. And we've been trying our best to uh, have a more constructive debate and better engagement with various communities, particularly the farming community in the region and across the UK. And um, I think having this sort of listening mode where you meet the people and you try to understand their thinking and their concerns and look at various evidence as well on the table is important. At the same time, it's important not to dilute the facts when you can establish some of the data and the science behind. We need to be honest about that too and not brush things under the carpet because some parts of the community get upset. So we need somehow to find a way to talk to everybody. But I think specifically we are coming to working with partnerships with other consultancies like Restore to look at the broader set of issues where we don't have enough expertise. We are carbon consultancy in the end, so we've got other folks who are ecologists. They've got biodiversity expertise. They've got natural capital expertise, and they've got the funding expertise as well. So they know how ELMS, this new system, how it works, how it can be supplemented by good private financing, how we can support the farmers and landowners in this transition. So we need to really reach out to the best people in the area and have a kind of holistic offering to the farmers and landowners and broad set of stakeholders to have this transition. Also, the food system in general, there are many issues there we haven't discussed today, and it's the kind of the availability of good quality food and nutritious foods affordable food and the role of supermarkets and large producers in sort of the way the system currently is and farming currently is. So I think there are so many kind of cogs in that system that are really difficult to turn, but we find that just going out there and talking to people and working with various professionals and experts like Bill in regenerative farming is very important.
That's great. Thank you, Dmitry. So I'm just noting that we have 4 minutes left before we head to break. So I'm just going to invite that if anybody wanted to directly ask Dmitry a question, then they're welcome to use the put their hand up chat function, and then we can unmute you, and we can go from there. Okay, so. Julian, I'll unmute you if that's okay.
Hi there. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Dmitry. Yeah, I made a few comments in the chat. I'm a long-term agriculturalist, but working for the community since 1984. I deal with critical risks. I feel obligated to do that, primarily sewage, the whole issue of recycling our nutrient back into the food chain is an extremely challenging task. Another area I've worked is flood risk, another critical risk. It's really not difficult to fix. We're prevented from doing so by a myriad of corrupt actors. So yeah, I mentioned it in the comment. Just storing stormwater on farms as a former irrigation engineer can at least double or treble or vastly more. In some areas, you get a 10 or 20-fold increase in food production from irrigation. This has huge climatic benefits, and here's the key: protects the poor sods downstream who are paying increasing flood risk insurance if they can even get it. Well, you don't mention that. Food scarcity is a construct of the agrochemical industry.
Yeah, Jill, I mean, thanks for reinforcing the point here. And I think our discussion about regen agriculture very much links to what you're saying about the intensive agrochemical industry. And I think, yeah, we can see, unfortunately, I think the vested interests that are trying to preserve the current system, but the current system looks less and less tenable, and we've got the tremendous biodiversity decline in the country over the past few decades, and so on. And climate change, we've got the flooding. We saw the Cumbria floods 10 years ago, terrible in Lancaster, Carlisle. So we see all that, and yet we've got a very strong, I think, force or set of forces trying to kind of maintain the current system. I think, but we need to find a way to break through that. And I think there could be a government's role in there, of course, top-down kind of legislation. But I think more and more we can see that it's the bottom-up transition that will deliver. I can't really see, when more and more people and farmers are converted to regenerative methods. And again, we need to be open-minded to the role of livestock, the ruminant livestock, as Bill said. We also need to be mindful about growing crops sustainably and vegetables and so on. We need all that on the bottom ground level to change in order for, I think, the system to be more sustainable. And flood mitigation is key. In our opportunity maps, we use floods mitigation areas that are priority for tree planting, for example, or habitat restoration. So that absolutely is more important than pouring concrete down in the cities. So thanks so much for that.
Thank you so much, Dmitry. I just noticed that, Bill, you have your hand up, and I would perhaps we'll just invite you to ask your question, and then we'll move on to break, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks very much. Just very quickly, Dmitry, I see that you're including the data from the Nethergill team about maximum sustainable output, which I think is a crucial way of thinking, because it shows that farmers are actually going to be better off financially if they stop using these, if they stop relying on purchased chemicals to boost production for its own sake. And there's a lesson there about perhaps re-educating a number of farmers about what the financial implications of their current model is actually doing to them. But and this comes back to Julian's point, the problem that we face with presenting those arguments is the power of the agribusiness lobby, which is founded on their ability to sell these products.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I'm glad that you guys are just speaking about all this in those open terms. I think I'm trying to have a slightly softer language just because the way we engage with multiple stakeholders and having set of meetings and discussions. But I think I agree with the root causes of some of the root causes of the problem. I think consumers again, or their lack of education or their lack of willingness to listen are also part of the problem, I think, and the big food industry as well. It's not just chemical and fertilizer companies, but the supermarkets and think it's sort of the overall the system is in many cases punishing farmers and forcing them to do what they've been doing in recent decades, but a lot of that is detrimental for the environment. So, how do we change that? Again, I think bottom-up action, and you're an example of that, and your network.
Have you spoken to the people at Nethergill? I think they would be very interested in having some of these conversations with you, if that would help.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and again, as I said, it's on our kind of to-do list to move towards that direction, the maximum sustainable output, and whether we can integrate that in our tools and advisory materials. And again, in the version 2 of our paper and our comms and our client work, we would be referring to those principles. So it's yes, very much a kind of direction of travel, I think, that we've pursued.
Great. Yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks for mentioning that. Thank you.